Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the community talk. Joining us today on this talk is Mr. Nitin Shah. Nitin is a cognitive hypnotic coach, trainer, and author. He is the CEO of Institute of Clinical Hypnosis and Related Sciences, and he is also the director of IHR Support Foundation. He is also the director of Visit MHP. It's an initiative to spread awareness about the importance of visiting mental health professionals before reaching the stage of disorders. Nitin has also authored The Destiny of Choice, a self help book. This book is much more than a self help guide, and a lot of a conversation is going to revolve around the contents of the book today. In the last decade, Nitin has trained over 800 professionals, including more than 300 coaches and 400 psychotherapists. His work is critical to the field of mental health in India, and we are delighted to have him here today with us. Uh, Welcome, Nitin, to the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha.
Yeah, so I would like to begin with with the present and with what iCharge is doing right now. So would you please tell us a little bit about iCharge and iCharge Foundation and the work that you are doing?
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
All right. So, ICAS is the parent organization. We are predominantly into conducting training programs, which offer step-by-step practical tools to psychologists and coaches so that they can apply those techniques with their clients and get the results that they're looking for. That's the primary role that ICAS does. And ICAS Support Foundation is the NGO wing where, with the help of people that we have trained and with other practitioners who we have supported through the different support activities that we have for practitioners, we also reach out to other organizations and other people who are seeking mental health support. So now, after pandemic, almost every activity that we're doing, both in IHS and IHS Support Foundation, is happening online. But there are a lot of activities that are happening in IHS Support Foundation. So Visit MHP is actually one of the initiatives under IHS Support Foundation, where we started talking about the importance of visiting a mental health practitioner, not because people have mental illness, but because they are mentally healthy and they want to become, for the lack of a word, healthier. Right? Or they're already achieving certain things in their life and they're happy with those achievements, but they feel that they want to do more, and at some place they're getting stuck. So that's a complete initiative within itself under ICAS Support Foundation. There are a couple of other initiatives. For example, there's something called as the Yes Project, where we tied up with an organization called Healing the Foundation. We trained some of their interns into conducting programs for helping youth understand the importance of mental wellness and how they can recognize people around them who are facing certain challenges and support them in a way in which they can guide those people to practitioners.
Right. Yeah. It sounds a lot like gatekeeping for mental health.
Correct. So to an extent, it's something similar to that. But the primary role that ICHAS plays is into training, both ICHAS and ICHAS Support Foundation, and in supporting people that we have trained into doing their own initiatives in their own way.
Yeah, so it also sounds like, a bit of a entrepreneurial agency that we are giving to people with this work. Yeah, so I was also really intrigued by the tagline that you have with IHRs. It says creating change unconsciously with the un in a bracket. And please tell us about the thought behind that.
Okay. So the way we look at mental health, or to be true, the way we look at achieving an outcome is that I consciously select an outcome and then my system needs to support me in doing what needs to be done to achieve that outcome. Correct? It could be something as simple as I want to manage weight, which is my conscious choice. In order to manage weight, I understand I need to do a set of things, starting with waking up in the morning so that I can go to the gym.
Right.
Right? Now that is a part of my conscious awareness. So before I can work with the client needs to have the conscious awareness of what needs to be done. Having said that, when the alarm rings in the morning, whether I put it on snooze or I wake up, right? really depends upon what is happening on an autopilot in my system. You will rarely come across a person telling you that the alarm rings in the morning and then I consciously think, "Can he so jate hain?" And then I sleep again. Generally what happens is I put the alarm rang in the morning, and on an autopilot I had this thought in my head, 10 more minutes. And then after every 10 minutes, I think 10 more minutes, which basically means that I wake up by the time the gym time is already over, right? Now, this is what creating change unconsciously means. That we are helping people first figure out exactly what their outcome is and what steps do they need to take to achieve that outcome. And then we are looking at all the unconscious hindrances that are acting up on an autopilot, which are stopping people from creating a change. And then we use a set of strategies and techniques to be able to help people work with that unconscious component. That's what differentiates us from almost every other field of therapy that exists right now, along with the fact that we are not just only focusing on unconscious, we are also focusing on conscious. It's just how you merge the two together, how you align the two together.
Right, right. So I've also read a lot about alignment and coming together to again move on that path of change that you see for yourself. I also was really intrigued by the eclectic approach that you've mentioned on around the courses, with the influences being from cognitive behavior therapy and psychodynamic, and then there is hypnosis, and there are all these other different approaches within the field of psychology. And Nitin, you yourself have had such a diverse educational background. You did BCom, and then you went on to do CS and law together, and then you moved into hypnosis and the mind and NLP. So it just made me wonder about the role of this diversity in your life, in terms of your diverse educational background and its impact on your personality, and also this eclectic, again, the diversity in the approach with these courses that you've formed.
Okay, so let me answer the eclectic part first, and then I'll come to my personal story and my personal journey. Yeah. So the thing is, like I said, creating change unconsciously, our objective is to be able to work with clients to be able to help them create an alignment between the unconscious and the conscious. And the reason behind that is you don't want the client to have a conflict with themselves. You don't want them to get up in the morning by fighting with themselves कि मुझे उठना है. You want that process to be more natural, more automatic, so that they are that the energy that they are saving from fighting with themselves can actually be utilized somewhere else where they would like to utilize. Right? To put it simply. Now, for that to happen, we needed to look at a series of modalities that would help people create that change. Right? And because my initiation into this field happened with unconscious, which is hypnosis, I understood the immense role that unconscious plays. But I also understood the limitations that most hypnotherapy institutes in India face, which is that they are so focused on hypnosis and trying to prove hypnosis as a mode of therapy in itself, that they actually miss the bigger picture. The true value of hypnosis is not that it's a therapeutic tool. The true value of hypnosis is that it's a tool that can help people become receptive. After that, you can combine it with any field of therapy, and you will actually make that field of therapy more powerful. So if you are someone who uses CBT with your clients, right, and you realize that there are certain clients who are able to do the homeworks very naturally, very effectively, you give them the requirements, and they will go home and they will religiously do the homework, and they see results. And there are other clients who are just not able to do the homework, right? Now the clients who are just not able to do the homework basically are fighting with themselves even to do the homework. It's not that they don't want to do the homework. If they did not want to do the homework, why are they coming and paying the therapist?
Right, yeah.
Unless they like the therapist's face, and then probably that's a separate issue, right? But apart from that, they're visiting a therapist because they really want to create a change, and they're not able to. So what's happening? Consciously they want to, but something is stopping them. Now there, if you club hypnosis with CBT, the effectiveness of CBT increases dramatically. Similarly, there are behavioral therapies. right? So
So
CBT will.
I just want to understand. You said something about receptiveness, that with hypnosis you become more receptive. So can you tell us a little more about this receptiveness that a person
Okay.
gets?
Have you ever watched a movie where you looked at a scene in the movie and it was a sad scene and you were moved by it? You literally had tears down your cheeks.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
You know it's a movie, right?
Yeah.
You know those people are being paid to do that, right?
Yeah.
Why are we crying?
It's sad. I think maybe for me it's something that I relate to, or something that touches me inside.
Precisely. So this touches me inside is a very good example of understanding what hypnosis really is. Hypnosis is a state where when you receive information, while consciously you may be thinking you want to reject that idea, right? But because you are willing to engage with that information, the information is having an influence on you. So while you are sitting and watching that movie, a part of you recognizes it's a movie, people are getting paid to do it. But it's connecting with a deeper part of you which is responding automatically. That's the receptivity that we are talking about, that it creates receptivity in something deep inside which actually controls your automatic responses. Now, does this mean that you are being controlled? Because that's one of the big myths that surrounds hypnosis. So again, go back to watching a movie example. When you are sitting and watching a movie, and if you choose to engage with the movie will influence you. Right? But that doesn't mean that you're forced to be influenced by the movie. You can at any point of time get up and leave the theater. That choice you always have.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the same equation with hypnosis. If you feel that the conversation that's happening, the interaction that you're having with the other person is of value for you, enough for you to want to engage with that conversation, to be a part of that, then that engagement, that hypnotic process will influence you. But if at any point you feel that this conversation is going in a direction that's not in my favor, or I would not like it, or I would rather not want, I would like to distance myself from it, then you always have a choice to get up and move out. When I say move out, literally from a theater, metaphorically from a hypnotic state.
Okay.
Right? You will always be able to tell the therapist that this is not what we agreed upon. So by receptivity, we mean making that part of you receptive, which in the example of waking up in the morning was telling you 10 more minutes. So that we can impress upon that part, keep 10 more minutes ki jagah, can we just change this thought to something else? Maybe chal uthte maza aayega. And can we make the new thought as automatic as the old one was? And that's the reason why I spoke about integration. So while I understand you can tell me that Nitin, even with CBT, I'm trying to restructure thoughts. The problem is I'm fighting with myself to restructure my thoughts with only CBT. What we are talking about is use a CBT restructuring in a hypnotic state so that there is no internal conflict. It can happen naturally and automatically, which is one. And second, in order to induce receptivity, it's not about control. It's not even about client trying to control their own mind. It's about the client trying to understand their mind. So again, to give you a comparison, in a standard thought restructuring process, you have an existing thought and you're trying to restructure it. Right? With the way we work, while that will be the first step that we will take, but if we realize that the thought is too stuck, so as to say, right, or too persistent, then it seems that the unconscious has a reason because of which it wants to stick to that thought. Now I can do two things. Either I can fight with the unconscious and try to control it. Okay? In the long run, it's a lost cause. Or I can connect with the unconscious and ask the unconscious, all right, so if you are persisting with this thought pattern or with this behavior, what is the objective behind it? Right? And we really consider unconscious to be a very, very intelligent being. It's at the end of the day controlling a lot of your body processes. But like when you eat food, you don't have to consciously sit and think, how are you digesting food? Your digestive system knows exactly how to work on an autopilot. And it works so perfectly that to say that it works on chance is stretching it a bit too far. Right? Okay. There's surely an internal intelligence that's running the entire system. That internal intelligence is unconscious. So if the unconscious is doing all those things to keep you alive, and choosing to persist with a so-called negative thought or a dysfunctional thought, it surely has a reason behind it. Now, rather than trying to tell it that you don't know enough and I know better and I want you to change it, I may just connect with the unconscious and ask the unconscious, what are you getting out of it? And can we find a better way of helping you get that? Right? And you'll be surprised how quickly those thoughts and behaviors can begin to change after that. So that's the reason for us, it's not about creating an internal conflict and fighting with yourself, right? Or controlling yourself. It's about understanding yourself and creating a change through that understanding.
So when we have this conversation with the unconscious, this is when we are getting into the hypnotic stage. And how do we understand the reasons behind persisting on certain negative thoughts?
Okay. So there are step processes that you can use, but those processes are based on an idea, right? So while you learn specific processes and specific step-by-step techniques, once you understand the idea behind it, you can also create your own processes. And that's again the beauty of hypnosis, that it allows you not to be stuck with a specific set of techniques. It allows you to study the client and create a process that suits the requirement of the client. The underlying principle will remain the same, that I want to connect with the unconscious. I want to figure out what the positive intention or the purpose behind the current behavior is, right? And then I want to be able to verify that the information is really coming from the unconscious and it's not the conscious acting up by analyzing and giving me a response, right? So this becomes the overall philosophy for this particular objective, right? But you can run this philosophy in multiple ways. And that's actually the part of your training, that why the training becomes so important, because it's not as simple as putting a format into ABCDE model or taking a client and telling them that these are the set of instructions that you need to follow. It's really about being able to understand the client and being able to adapt to the requirements of the client by creating processes that will work for them.
Right. And in this adaptation, I imagine that again, that integration is an important, in the sense, this eclectic approach is an important part of that.
It is, because then it allows you to not be dependent on anything. So I spoke about CBT, right? But I'm not just dependent on CBT. I can start with a client, begin with CBT, realize that the client is finding it difficult to restructure their thoughts, transition into hypnosis, figure out the positive intention, which I may do using an NLP process.
Okay. Wow.
When I identify the positive intention, if the positive intention has a deeper emotional connect to it, then from there itself, I may transition into an inner child or regression process, which is basically based on the principle of psychodynamics of a lot of issues coming from childhood, right? And after I've done all of that, I may revert back to the thought restructuring and close it with thought restructuring again to check that is the thought getting restructured effectively now. If it is, everything that I have done in the process has worked. If it is not, that means there are additional things that we need to do, which we may do in the next session. So what it does is you're no longer dependent on any one technique. You can keep playing with multiple things depending upon what comes up. For you, you may know that you are moving from a philosophical point of view from CBT into a behavioral approach, into a psychodynamic approach, but that's for you as a practitioner, right? For a client, it's one seamless process. For them, it's like this was one process that I went through.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I mean, the amount of knowledge and work that goes into creating this entire thing, and I can imagine that for different clients, their individual needs also, or the process that suits them also may be different. So
it is. At the same time, the way the process has been designed, there is always an indication, counterindication to every process. So what it does is, as a person who's learning it or who's practicing it, you have very clearly defined signs. For example, the moment I say CBT and I said that the thought is not getting restructured, and we ask the client, is there a positive intention? And if the unconscious response was saying yes, then I know the moment the answer is yes, I have to go into reframing. When I'm into reframing, if there is no emotional component coming up, then there's a different set of process that I will use. If there's a deeper emotional component that comes up, then I'll probably transition into inner child. While I'm in inner child, if the client shows me or tells me that they can remember a specific memory, then I may transition from there into regression. if they just tell me that there is this feeling that I can sense, which is very strong, then I may just continue with inner child. So every step has indication. It's almost like a flowchart, right? So while it sounds very complex and it requires an X set of skills, obviously, but when you begin practicing it, because it's in a flowchart format, you can just keep that flowchart in front of you. The client's eyes are already closed, so they don't really know what you are referring to. You can just refer to the flowchart and check how you want to proceed from it.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I can just imagine, and there are like a couple of questions that are running through my head, but I think we've digressed enough for a 1 hour conversation. So, getting back to again the diversity and your personal choices, you know, in the education dynamic with CS and law, and tell us about that.
So my journey has been quite simple. I'm the only child, right? So I've been pampered all my life by my parents and by everyone around me. So one day my father decided that I get everything on a platter. I would probably never learn to live alone. So that's the reason why he kind of pushed me out of the house, and he said that you have to go out and study somewhere else. Okay? I kept delaying it, but beyond the point, obviously, I had to agree. I came to Bombay for my graduation, which was in BCom. Why did I select BCom? Probably the first college that I went to and the first course that I got admission into was BCom, so I took BCom. There was no real reason for it, right? When I was doing my BCom is when I met my partner, and because of the fact that we got into a relationship, now I needed to stay in Bombay. In order to stay in Bombay, I needed a hostel. Okay? The nearest hostel to the current hostel that I was living in, I needed an admission in one of the colleges nearby. And one of the nearest colleges was a law college. So I got admission into law simply because I wanted to stay in Bombay. Okay, there was really no reason behind it. When I got an admission in law, a couple of months down the line, I think my mother called me up and she asked me, "What are you doing in Bombay?" And I said, "I'm doing law." And both my parents have completed the law and so on. So we have done law. We know how much you study. So, what is the big deal in law? So I said, I'm not saying it's a big deal. I'm simply saying I'm doing law because that's what you asked me. So she said, do something else along with that. I said, what do you want me to do? She said, either pick up CE or CS. For whatever reason, I don't remember. I think a lot of my friends were doing CS then. So I picked up CS for that reason. Or probably because it was shorter. One of those two reasons. So I did CS because of this reason. Now for me, studies is not really a problem. I can read something a couple of, maybe a time, one or two times, and I'm good to go and appear for a paper. And even if I'm not prepared, I'm confident enough to ensure कि clear तो कर ही लूँगा, इतना तो पता है. So that's the reason why, because I've had quite good grasp over understanding. That's the reason why education was never really a problem. I did what I did because I wanted to stay in Bombay. That was as simple as that. Why I got into hypnosis was, and then psychology, is because my partner, I spoke to her father that I wanted to get married to her, and she comes from a completely different background. She is a Muslim, I am a Jain, so you can understand the background story that would have played out as well. And that's the place where she was put into a house arrest. When she got put into a house arrest, I tried everything that I could to figure out a way to connect with her, but I couldn't. So when everything logical I ran out of ideas, so as to say, I started exploring, is there any way in which I can do something to increase my chances of connecting with her? I don't know what that do something would be, but anything that I can do. And that's when I came across a book called The Power of Subconscious Mind. I'm not someone who reads a lot, at least at that point of time I would not. But it was so funny that I used to live at Churchgate, and every place that I went, I would see this book. I literally picked up that book after getting fed up. I'm seeing it everywhere, I may as well read it once. When I started reading the book is when I realized that there are things that the book talks about that I had never considered. Right? The idea that you can ask your unconscious to help you is, it was unheard of before that for me. I know people around me who went to a spiritual background would keep telling me, connect with yourself, speak to yourself, right? See guidance from yourself. But I could never figure out what does this really mean. It's when I was reading that book is when I realized, or at least I started realizing, probably this is what people mean when they say connect with yourself. I tried a couple of strategies and approaches from that book, and it worked. It worked in the sense that the first time I remember I was going off to sleep, and so I did not really still completely comprehend the idea of subconscious or unconscious then, but for me it was very close to how I perceived God. Right. So what I did was everything that was given in the book, I would translate it from unconscious to God. That's about it. Baki, the process will remain the same. So one night before sleeping, I was kind of having a conversation with myself, and I told myself that, God, if you did not want me and Misbah to be together, you would not have made me meet. Though I understand you may have changed your mind and you have a right to change your mind, but I don't know that she's safe or not. And that's bothering me. So whether we can be together or not is a secondary issue right now. I want to know that she's safe and that she's fine, because it was eventually my decision to go and speak to her father. Right? While I was sleeping, I saw a dream, which while I was seeing, I did not realize it's a dream. For me, at that point of time, it was like something that was really happening with me. So I saw myself going into an area, then I was waiting over there for some time. Then I saw a road in my dream, which I had consciously, I don't remember seeing ever. I took that road. At the end of the road, I found a left turn. I went to the left turn, and then I saw a Panwale ka shop. I'm standing in my dream. I'm standing at the Panwala shop, and I look up and I see Misbah standing over there with 2 or 3 people. And for me, this was real. When I got up, I was so happy because I thought, I know she's safe. She's alive. And then after 5 minutes, I realized I was sleeping, and that it was a dream. Right? So all of a sudden, there was this period where I was really low when I'm going off to sleep. Then I wake up in the morning and I'm super excited that she's safe, and I'm then super disappointed at LA. This was a dream. But during the day, I kept feeling restless. So at some point, because of restlessness, I decided I may as well go to her area. Right? I tried doing everything logical that I could think of when I went to her area, and it just did not work. Eventually, when I was about to give up, I thought I will just follow the dream the way I saw in my dream. I'll do exactly what I did in the dream. If I find that road, I'll take that road. If not, then I'll go back to the hostel. Coincidentally, I found the road. I walked to the end of the road. I found the left turn. I found the Panwala. And I look up and I see Misbah, and I can't tell you how excited I was at that moment. Because of 2 reasons. One, obviously, that I could see that she's safe and she's alive. And second, I realized what I read in the book works, which basically means that I have a template to see how I can connect with her again. Right? My next 10 months was about following my dreams to go and see her. And not once do I remember seeing a dream in which I saw her, and the next day I went to her area and I did not see her. Not once. And this is, well, I understand once it could be a coincidence, twice it could be a coincidence. 10 months is a pretty long coincidence, if I have to call it that. Right? And that's when I became more and more intrigued in how the mind works and how mind influences our perception and our reality and so on. With that, I started researching more, and that's when I came across one of my professors who sat with me and who had a good 3-hour, 4-hour discussion with me, and then he recommended a course in hypnosis. Then Nitin, there's this course which is happening. I don't even remember the detail. Telling me it was a hypnosis course or not. He just said there's just some course which is related to mind. After speaking to you, I'm really sure that you would be really happy and interested in doing a course like that. I used to have a lot of time. Time was never a problem. So I spoke to my father, and my father said that, any which ways, तुम क्या कर रहे हो ना? So if you want to attend a course. That's okay. So that's how I attended the course. By the time I finished my level 1, I realized that I want to take this up as my field. That was clear. Actually, by the time I finished my level 1, I was sure that I want to become a trainer in that. And then I started getting trained further into that field, and I completed the course that I was with. I became a trainer for that institute for almost 3-4 years. I was with them for a very long time. Coincidentally, on the day on which I was going for my teacher's training, so there were only 2 things that I waited for in my life. Everything else I've got on a plate. Okay, one was Misbah, and second was to attend the trainer program, because that was like one of those things that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
While I'm in my train, going to Goa for my teacher's training. My teacher is asking me, Nitin, you would be very happy that you are becoming a part of this training program. You have waited almost a year to be a part of this training. And I remember the conversation I telling him that I know I'm happy, but I'm not completely convinced. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, see, I got into this field because I wanted to get married to this girl. Okay? I had a very clear objective. Am I able to connect with her again? The answer is yes. Is my relationship with her better? The answer is yes. Do I have a greater chance of getting married to her? The chances are yes. Am I married to her? The answer is no. So I don't know whether I can with complete conviction stand in front of a large audience and tell those people that I can vouch this works. This makes your life better. Yes. Does this completely work? Don't know. Can't say. We are having that conversation and I receive a call from Mizra. And she tells me that my father has found someone to get me married to and I may be getting married in the next 4-5 days. And cuts the phone. So I have no idea what's happening after that. Right? And obviously in the train, there are people who I know and they figured out something is wrong. So they asked me, why not go back? You have a couple of days before the training starts and then come back after having a conversation with him. So I come back to Bombay. Misbah has been very clear from day one that I'm never going to leave my family for you. I don't know what happened that day. She comes, we meet, we go back to Goa. On day one of my teacher's training, I'm getting married to her. Okay. So when that happened, I had no reasons to say this doesn't work. Yeah. Because almost everything that I was looking for from what I was learning was there for me. And because I'm quite good with grasping things and kind of integrating things together. When I did the course, I realized the value it has for a lot of people who are practitioners. Okay? And that's why I became more and more keenly interested in working with practitioners. And then the rest is kind of a story, history. After that, I continued training with the institute for 3-4 years, and there was certain difference of opinions in terms of the curriculum. I wanted to offer a more eclectic approach. They were very happy with what they were offering. And to be fair to them, their course is good. It's just that what I was looking for is probably something more comprehensive in terms of what I could teach. And second was that I always felt that a practitioner's course should only focus on practitioners. When you involve people who are looking for spiritual growth, self-development, and they're also looking for becoming practitioners. When you have two different sets of people together in a program, it's very difficult for a program to do justice to either. Right? Because the needs of practitioners are more logical, more practical, more concrete. The needs of people who are looking at spiritual growth, spiritual development is more abstract. Right? They want to understand the deeper meanings in life, which therapeutically has a tendency to overcomplicate things when you're working with things. Right? So that's the reason why when we started iChas, one of the first things that we kind of established was iChas will focus on working with practitioners. And that's the reason why we have been in operation for 9-10 years now. Under iChas, we don't ever conduct a self-help program. All programs under iChas are practitioners program, whether they're short programs or long programs, they're all practitioners programs, all based on an eclectic approach.
Okay. So, yeah, please go on.
And that's basically a result of the journey that I've gone through, because when I moved out of CHI, then I started looking at additional things that I can incorporate. I did my NLP, I did my CBT, I did a couple of other programs at that point of time. Then when I was doing my master's in psychology is when I started realizing how each of these fields actually merge together. You only need a tool to be able to integrate them. And that tool for us becomes hypnosis. And almost everything that we teach today, that we cover in our programs today, is a combination of these two things. What I have experienced in my personal life and how it's transformed my life, and how I've been able to combine that experience with the different psychological modalities that I've learned and to convert that into structured processes that people can follow and practice. So that's kind of been the overall journey.
Yeah, in fact, with what you just said, I think just on a personal note, I think like listening and the Connect Heart has been doing a lot of work in listening. And for me personally, listening is like that it integrates everything else that is happening, therapy and whatever kinds of therapy. But listening feels like that thread that ties all of this together, or an essential skill in that sense. But yeah, I would.
So Aisha, in a sense, effective listening is one of the most powerful ways of inducing someone in a hypnotic state. Because when you listen to them, they start getting connected to you. When they start getting connected to you, they naturally start becoming more receptive to you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Again, so we are also again looking at connection and that space, creating that space between people. Wow. So also, I would recommend everybody to read the book. It is called Destiny of Choice, and it is such a thrilling journey, and it is unreal. And I think I had those highs and lows while reading the book. When you described the dream, and I was just like, what is happening, and how is this like? This is not real. And then the next day you see her, and then there are so many. I mean, the patience and persistence that you have shown through that entire journey is, I mean, I cannot imagine somebody doing that and, going through that. It is just amazing. So I would recommend everybody here to definitely read the book. Yeah, and it also made me think about that. On one side you have all of these things happening with Misbah, but it's also making you. It's also in terms of your own personal growth. You're thinking about. You read the book by Joseph Murphy, and then you're also thinking about. You're intrigued by the mind, and you're getting into that space as well along with this happening. And I was also thinking that this moment when you are in the train, and everybody sort of like these are your colleagues and trainers, and they tell you that okay, go ahead, and you can go back, and everybody's so supportive. And then again you get married on the day, and you're also stepping into the trainers program. And so it just made me think about, and again your professor um, sitting down with you for 3 to 4 hours, and talking to you about hypnosis. And so I was just thinking about the role that your trainers and professors also played in this in your journey.
So to be true, I have had incredible support all my life. Okay, and I know my father moved through, kind of pushed me out of the house, thinking that I'll at least now people will stop pampering me, and therefore I would be able to do things on my own. The fact is, after I came to Bombay, I was pampered in Bombay by all my friends, right? So I have literally been supported, pampered across length and breadth. When I was with the institute that I was talking about, all the colleagues, all the friends, the amount of understanding a lot of them showed. I don't know if I've seen anyone else who has received the kind of support that I've received throughout my life. Right? So that's been one part of the story. And second is the role that my teachers, that my trainers have played. So the teacher that I spoke about, who introduced me to the whole concept of hypnosis and so on, coincidentally, I have not really had that. The conversation that I'm talking about was my second conversation with that professor. Okay. And I think after that conversation, I probably had 4 or 5 more conversations with him. But that one conversation changed the direction of my life.
Yeah.
The trainer that I had when I was with CHI, and then when I became a trainer with CHI, the way he looked at life, the way he understood life, the way he trained people, a lot of that has shaped the way I approach my training programs. Obviously, there are differences, right? In terms of what we focus on. But at least the degree with which we will have patience, we would listen to people in a training program. There is never ever a chance where we would discourage any question. And for me, I don't come from a training field. That was my first experience of watching a trainer. So I'm sure that experience kind of imprinted upon me so much that when a lot of people tell me today that Nitin, you are really good at what you do, a major part of it goes to the trainers that I've got trained with, because I have imbibed a lot of those things from those trainers. The same is true with my NLP trainer. So with the hypnosis trainer, I learned how you can more or less answer every question. And with the NLP trainer, I learned how you can be completely comfortable not answering any question.
Wow.
Completely opposite personalities, completely opposite approaches to training, both highly effective. And I was lucky enough to be a part of both. So I could incorporate both as a part of what I'm doing. Right? So probably these three people, in terms of my teachers, played the biggest role in my life. And as I said, I've kind of received support incredibly, so that's a bonus.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all your friends and definitely Misbah as well, I'm sure. But yeah, and also what you said reminded me of just paradoxes and us living in this world of, paradoxes, and two completely counterpoints can coexist at the same time.
They can coexist and they can make each point more strong and more powerful.
Yeah. So I think like we may need to wrap. So I wanted to end with two questions. One being that you've been in the mental health field in India for quite some time now. So what are your hopes and fears with regards to the future of mental health in India?
Okay, so my fear first is that there are too many trainings being done in the name of mental health, and most of the people who are conducting those training programs have no idea what training is. Right? That is a big concern, because when you are training psychologists, psychology students, you're responsible for two sets of people: the one that you're training and the one that they will work with. Right? And that is a really worrying sign as far as where we are right now. I mean, I know people who would tell me that I have done a 3-day course in hypnosis, and after that I've become a full-fledged hypnotherapist. And I have a 28-day program plus I don't know how many hours of online training plus practice sessions, and I think even that is probably less. Right? Nowadays I hear people telling me that I have done a CBT workshop 4 hours and I am a CBT practitioner. I really, it's kind of really difficult to understand if you even understood the basics of CBT in 4 hours, and then to actually call yourself a practitioner who's going to go and work with clients based on that is a bit worrying. So that's the worrying part of it.
Yeah.
The good part, there are so many of them now, right, that people have started becoming more careful. And they started doing the due diligence before they attend a program or join a program and so on. So that's the good part of it. I think pandemic, if nothing else, has done that because so many people came on board for online trainings, people realized that you can't really, for the lack of another word, trust every training program that's being conducted, and you need to do your due diligence for the same. Second is, there is a lot more movement in the overall awareness of mental health. Okay. Which is good. I, for example, during pandemic or after pandemic, I've had people who I have known for years, who I know would have never ever considered therapy, acknowledged, recognized, and were willing to seek help. Now, this is a huge transition for people who would sit and make fun of others who would be going to therapy, to actually acknowledging that I need therapy and I'm willing to. It's not a small number. The number of people that I'm seeing who are transitioning from here to here is a huge number, which tells me we are in the right direction as far as mental health awareness is concerned.
Yeah.
And a lot of good work. There are a lot of NGOs now which are working in the area of mental health. I've had a lot of conversations with Sachin many a times where we have discussed about what we can do and how we can work both independently, individually, and together. And I see a lot of this integration happening where different people are coming together to create that awareness, which is really nice. So that's the kind of the positive side of what we are looking at.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of access, in terms of awareness and recognizing that help is available and to take help, definitely, I think the pandemic has somehow been a catalyst in doing that.
Also, the comfort that people have with being able to seek help online, which used to be one of the biggest hurdles that itna travel kaun karega.
Yes.
So now with people willing to take sessions online, individual sessions, group sessions, when you're doing group sessions online for a trainer, for example, earlier, anyone who offered a group session had to offer it in the physical space. कुछ नहीं तो physical space का तो cost लगता ही था ना. So they couldn't even, the number of people who could offer that was very limited. Today, because of online, you have a lot of these platforms completely available for free. Right? You could really do proper sessions, group sessions, individual sessions for free, and help people at least understand the importance of why they need to visit a practitioner and seek help. I think that all has been a huge boom. So that's the silver lining in the pandemic, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you so much. But one last question that we can end with is again that you have an entrepreneurial setup, and along with that you also have a foundation running. So any suggestions or advice for the young entrepreneurs among us in the field of mental health?
I know a lot of people will tell you that mental health as a field does not pay well. They're wrong. Okay? There is a lot of scope for earning in the field that you are in, provided you are smart. So if you think I'm going to get a job and in the job I'm going to get paid very high, that scene is still sad. Okay? But if you feel that I eventually am working towards setting up my own private practice, that field is incredibly booming. Because one, you become an entrepreneur in yourself, which means you're not dependent on anyone. With online counseling and online therapy, your cost for setting up your own enterprise has literally gone down to zero. Right? Earlier, our biggest expense was venue. Now that's really not a problem. I don't need a clinic space. I could do it on Zoom or Google Meet or whichever other platform I want to do it on, which means your actual investment has gone down to zero. Now, because you're saving so much money on that investment, if you could just focus on developing your skill sets and learn how to get initial clients. And there are strategies that I think almost all good programs would cover as a part of their program. That if they're training you to become a therapist, they would also train you how to generate your initial clients. If you get that bit of training, whatever money you're spending on your training program can easily be recovered in a year's time. And as an entrepreneur, to recover your entire investment in 1 year, okay, is remarkable. No other industry offers you that opportunity.
Yeah.
And beyond that, whatever you're earning is a bonus. When I say bonus, in the sense that it's not really dependent on any additional expenses that you're making. It's basically about how effectively you've been able to work in the first year. But the prerequisite is, do you have the skill sets? And do you know how you can distinguish yourself as a niche compared to all other people who are trying to take therapies, right? As long as you're able to do these two things, mental health from a career point of view, and I'm specifically talking about from an earning point of view, has huge potential.
Right. So thank you so much, Nitin, for this lovely, wonderful conversation. And I'm sure I have learned a lot, and I hope that so have others. So we'll just now open the room for questions. If anybody may have any questions.
Please feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer those questions. And the questions may be even about things other than what we have discussed right now in the session. If you have any other questions also, please feel free to.
Thank you so much, Nitin, for such an honest conversation, and you've been so generous with your time and entertained our questions as well. So thank you so much for being here. It was delightful talking to you.
Thank you for inviting me. It was really nice to connect with all of you. If any of you have any questions later on, or if you feel that you want to connect with me later, Aisha has already left all the details. Also, once you visit the website, if you want, you can just in the chat inform the chat people that you want to connect with Nitin, and they would be able to share my number with you. Or if you want, I can share my number here also if that helps. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nitin. Yeah, I think.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you for
thank
having
you.
me.